This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist, and I'd like to welcome you to a special 5-part podcast series sponsored by Hanzo. In this series, we consider how to leverage artificial intelligence in compliance investigations. In this podcast series, I'm joined by several members of the Hanzo team as we explore the current best practices around investigations and how your compliance function can take investigations to a new level of cost, efficiency, and operational proficiency utilizing tools provided by Hanzo. Our explorations include considering the Department of Justice's guidance on investigations recently released, the use of AI in the Hanzo Investigator, how Hanzo technology can help a company overcome investigative challenges, and Hanzo's specific approach to finding and managing data across literally the entire life cycle of an investigation. In this exploration, we are joined by Sean Friedland, Hanzo's Senior Product Marketing Manager and Compliance, Jim Murphy, the VP of Products, and Keith Laska, the CEO of Hanzo. I know you will enjoy this series. It has lots of information packed into it, which you will be able to utilize in your compliance program and more specifically in your investigations going forward. In this part 4, I'm joined by Keith Laska, CEO at Hanzo, to consider how the use of AI in investigations improves the workflow and processes around solving complex problems that compliance professionals face around big data. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, back for another episode in our 5-part series with Hanzo about conducting more conclusive compliance investigations with both AI and web-based evidence. Today, you're in for a real treat as I'm joined by Keith Laska. Keith is the CEO of Hanzo, and some of our listeners will remember you from the Innovation and Compliance podcast we did earlier this year. But I was wondering if you might just give a few words about your background and really what brought you to Hanzo, because you're not really a lawyer from the compliance space.
Well, first of all, thanks, Tom, for having me on this podcast. Really appreciate your insights with the industry and everything you've done for the industry. So just a little bit about me. I started my career as a professor of French and Italian at Phillips Exeter Academy up in Exeter, New Hampshire. After a short stint there, I joined a company called TransPerfect, which is one of the largest providers of language translation services in the world. Really happy there, but then moved on to a company called SDL, where I was lucky enough to be a part of a growth movement that really saw my area of responsibility go from really what was a startup up to over a $70 million business with 500 employees over a 12-year period. 7 of those years were spent living, working, and building out business across Europe and Asia, so I really got a great sense of global business from that experience. It was when I was in London that I first interacted with Hanzo, at that time a small but truly special company that was focused on web archiving for historical preservation. You know, you fast forward a few years and Hanzo's really become one of the major technology players in the enterprise risk mitigation, compliance, and litigation support markets. So that's how I got to where I am today.
So Keith, I've spoken in earlier episodes with Sean Friedland and Jim Murphy about the state of internal compliance investigations and how Hanzo technology works in addressing some of the myriad, both legal and operational challenges. And I know you spent a lot of time traveling and meeting with different legal and compliance professionals around the country. And I would really ask you and look forward to your views from a macro level. What are some of the consistent themes that you were seeing in terms of both problems and solutions for organizations?
That's a great question, Tom, and one I've got a lot of time to think about on planes, trains, and automobiles. I think it comes down to this one prevailing challenge that has kind of a ripple effect throughout an organization. You know, as humans, we create and produce new data faster than we can even process and understand it. Right now, in any office across America, millions of new pieces of unstructured web data are being created with every single keystroke by every employee. From website traffic to social media activity to their chats and exchanges and team collaboration tools and email, there's this endless river of data that's flowing with information. Right now, within the corporate compliance and legal functions, managing and understanding data across its life cycle and understanding the risks, the insights, the opportunities that exist with that data just hasn't been fully embraced and operationalized just yet. Progress is being made, and we are excited to be working on solving these problems and addressing these challenges head on with some great partners.
So I was at a conference this week, a major conference in the compliance space called Compliance Week 2019. And one of the keynote speakers was a woman who's quite well known in the compliance space named Wei Chen. And she named as one of the top challenges for compliance practitioners going forward into the next decade, literally 2020, is the data that's available and the technology around using that data. So when you talk about embracing and operationalizing data within the corporate compliance and legal functions, what does that mean to you?
Well, Tom, I think it comes down to building technology that solves problems as they organically appear and evolve within an organization. Using AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning are really part of that solution to processing and controlling the data with the scale and speed that's needed. But it's not some magic bullet that automatically fixes everything. And of course, not all AI and tech is created equally. Even the DOJ is elevating their expectations around how compliance teams use and leverage data. Their recently updated guidance on their evaluation of corporate compliance programs that my colleague Sean spoke about suggests that compliance teams should really leverage the wealth of data they collect to identify any patterns of misconduct and compliance weakness, and also that they should be receiving funding and budget to improve the mechanisms around the processes of conducting and reporting on investigations.
Keith, earlier Jim Murphy talked about a 3-step process that the Hanzo tool utilizes. And if I could simplify it down, it was number 1, identifying and collecting the data. Number 2, actually doing the data mining, and that's where the AI comes in. And then number 3, what does the data tell you? How is it analyzed? What does a report look like? And is that an approach? I know Hanzo's done a lot of work in the legal space and is moving into the compliance space in a much larger way. But is that type of approach, has that resonated with lawyers? And is that something that you think could be replicated in the compliance space?
Absolutely. It has resonated with the legal profession, litigation professionals who have used us for those types of investigations. If you take a look at the markets and you take a look at the data along the EDRM model, you have vast quantities, exabytes and exabytes of data that are available on the public web. But really, nobody spends a lot of time there because the cost and the effort to access that within the timescales that are required with legal professionals and litigation professionals working on mission critical projects. It's just impossible to apply human resource to that. So most of the money and the time and the effort has been spent on active litigation. If you could actually become more proactive in some cases and try to avoid that litigation by harnessing the value of the web, that would be so powerful for litigation professionals. And that's really where we're focused. We're focusing our efforts.
You've used the word litigation. In the compliance world, I think compliance practitioners would substitute the word litigate or substitute the word risk for the word litigation. Do the techniques, tools, and tactics employed by Hanzo work equally if we put the word risk in instead of litigation?
Well, so it's a very good question. I think there was a quote that I read recently that said the evolution of litigation professionals is actually to be risk mitigation professionals because they can identify and spot issues before they come up. But I think if you asked the wide berth of our profession, whether they're in compliance, litigation roles, generally discovery roles, if they could identify or potentially identify a problem before it became active litigation, would they? And I'm pretty sure they would. And this is where AI and particularly, machine learning modules and data sets can come in very helpful. If you kind of ran potential risk scenarios through AI, in the first instance, it wouldn't be that helpful. But the proper data sets with the proper training, which litigation professionals, compliance professionals have knowledge of, you could really make a powerful and effective risk mitigation platform come true. And that's where the future of Hanzo is focused as well.
The phrase used in compliance, Keith, is called proactive monitoring, and it sounds like you're really moving towards helping the compliance professional understand not proactive monitoring just with the data inside their corporation, but within a much broader set of data that, frankly, I think many of us, myself included, would have trouble getting our heads around absent someone that had a tool or other techniques to help take a look at it and then analyze it.
Absolutely. Look, there are two ways to gain efficiencies from a problem the size of litigation. And I think the statistics prove that companies can spend up to 1/3 of their operating profits on litigation. So it's just shy of $23 billion per annum for large U.S. corporations. So the first way is you streamline and reduce the cost of litigation when it does occur. But wouldn't it be just as prudent, if not more prudent, to invest in risk mitigation and early detection strategies prior to the problem occurring, right? And so if you were to try to do that and ward off risk, you can effectively find the truth of a matter faster than a human being can. And I think that's one of the reasons why compliance and legal professionals shy away from the public web. It's just too vast to get their hands around, understandably. This is where AI and machine learning comes in.
I thought this episode would be monikered around planes, trains, and automobiles, but your last phrase, Keith, find the truth of the matter, I think resonates with every compliance professional in a much more powerful way. So with that, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time, but I wanted to thank you for taking the time to visit with me today. I hope our listeners will join us in our next episode, where you're going to give some thoughts about Hanzo's mission and really tie this podcast series together. So I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. We will link to these resources in the show notes, but if you want to obtain more information, check out the Hanzo website at www.hanzo.co. There are a significant amount of resources available on the website. In addition to information on the Hanzo Dynamic Investigator, there's a series of ebooks, white papers, and other information which can help you in your investigation. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to visiting with you again. This podcast series is a special presentation of the Compliance Podcast Network.